On my 30th birthday, my parents took my $2,300,000. They said it was for my sister. I didn't cry, because the money they stole was a trap. My parents drained every dollar they thought I had saved for 10 years on my birthday. There was no warning, no apology, just a silent notification flashing across my phone while I stood behind the pharmacy counter in my gray uniform. Withdrawal, $2,300,000 successfully processed. For a moment, the world tilted. I was holding a prescription bottle in one hand, halfway through my shift, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant and cheap coffee, when that number lit up my screen. My fingers went numb. My breath turned shallow. Something inside me snapped so cleanly that I almost didn't feel it at first. They thought I would cry. They thought I would beg. Instead, I smiled, finished the prescription in my hand, and clocked out without saying a word. Because what they did not know was that I had built the perfect trap for exactly that moment. Every form, every signature, every transaction, every dollar they thought they were stealing had already been arranged to expose them. They believed they were emptying my life. In reality, they had just signed their own downfall. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White siding, trimmed hedges, a flag my father raised every morning like clockwork. Neighbors waved when they passed, convinced we were the kind of family that had Sunday dinners, warm laughter, and inside jokes that lasted for years. What they never saw was how quiet it became once the front door closed. There was no laughter inside that house, only the low hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hallway clock, and my mother's voice calculating what I owed her next. When I was 21, fresh out of community college, I landed my first real job at a pharmacy on Burnside Street. I still remember bringing home my first paycheck. It was not huge, but it was mine. I had earned it, standing on my feet all day, learning prescriptions, customer names, insurance codes, and the strange rhythm of adult responsibility. I walked into the kitchen that evening, proud of myself, holding that check like proof that I had finally become someone independent. My mother, Elaine, barely looked at it. She just said, "You'll put 70% into the family fund. We all contribute." My father, Martin, nodded from the table like she had quoted a law. That was how it started. Every dollar I earned slowly became theirs. They said it was for the house. They said it was for emergencies. They said families helped each other. But nothing in that house ever improved. The roof still leaked every winter. The old water heater still groaned. The back steps still sagged under their own weight. Meanwhile, my younger sister Haley got a new laptop, new clothes, weekend trips with friends, and everything she needed before she even had to ask. I told myself I did not mind. I told myself that maybe one day they would notice how hard I worked. Maybe they would appreciate me. Maybe they would finally see me as more than the daughter who could be counted on to pay, fix, carry, and endure. By the time I was 24, my salary had increased, and my contribution to the so-called family fund jumped to 80%. That was when the truth settled into me. This was not family sharing. It was control, dressed up as love. I lived off instant noodles and hand-me-downs. I wore the same gray shoes until the soles peeled away. I skipped coffee, skipped haircuts, skipped vacations, skipped everything that made life feel like mine. Haley never worked a day in her life, but somehow she was always exhausted. She complained about med school applications, long essays, recommendation letters, and the pressure of being the future doctor of the family. Every time she bragged about her tuition being handled, I would look at my mother and see that faint smirk on her face, like she was proud of how well her little investment was paying off. Still, I tried to be the good daughter. I helped with bills, I mowed the lawn, I fixed the car when my father said the repair shop was too expensive. I picked up groceries. I drove Haley to appointments. I listened to my mother's criticism and swallowed my own anger until it felt normal. I told myself that someday they would see me differently. But I was never the daughter they bragged about. That was always Haley. Haley, the future doctor. Haley, the one with potential. Haley the one worth investing in. I was the one who handled everyone else's problems quietly. I was the daughter who stayed invisible so the family machine could keep running. Then, one rainy Sunday afternoon, I found out just how invisible I really was. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop off groceries. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast. Rain tapped steadily against the windows. Aunt Rachel was there, helping my mother move dishes from the counter to the table. I was carrying in a bag of produce when Aunt Rachel mentioned something so casually that it froze me mid-step. She said, "Elaine told me Haley's last 2 years of tuition will be covered. You must feel relieved." I looked at her. Covered by what? Aunt Rachel blinked, confused that I did not already know. Your savings, of course. Elaine said you'd do anything for family. For a second, I could not move. I remember the sound of the rain. I remember the smell of burnt toast. I remember my mother's voice carrying from the next room, light and confident, as if the decision had already been made and my consent was just a detail nobody needed. That day, something inside me changed. I did not shout. I did not cry. I did not confront my mother in front of Aunt Rachel. I just smiled, helped carry the groceries inside, and acted exactly like the obedient daughter they expected me to be. But from that moment on, every step I took was deliberate. Every password I changed, every account I opened, every bank statement I left where they could find it. Every little detail became part of a plan. It would take 3 years, but when my 31st birthday came, so would their reckoning. For 3 years, I lived like a ghost in my own life. I worked 2 jobs, weekday shifts at the pharmacy, weekend bookkeeping for a clinic downtown. Nobody in my family knew about the second job. Nobody knew where the money from that job went. Every dollar went somewhere only I could access. To my parents, I was still the obedient daughter handing over family contributions. Still useful, still quiet, still manageable. To me, I was building the wall that would finally separate my life from theirs. My mother used to drop by the pharmacy just to check on me. She always smiled in front of my coworkers, the warm, proud mother everyone thought she was. Then she would lean close enough for only me to hear and whisper, "Don't forget rent's due next week. Your sister needs books too." Her perfume always lingered after she left, sharp, floral, and suffocating. Every time she said, "your sister," my chest tightened. Haley did not even know what those books cost. She only knew they magically appeared. I started noticing the pattern. My parents always asked for money right after my raises, right after bonuses, right after any change in my income. My mother always knew before I told her. At first, I thought she was guessing. Then one weekend, while cleaning their attic, I found the reason. There was a locked box pushed behind old Christmas decorations and dusty photo albums. I opened it expecting maybe insurance papers or old tax files. Instead, I found copies of my bank statements, tax documents, and even my Social Security card. Things they had kept for safekeeping since I was a teenager. The edges of the papers were yellowed, but the rage that hit me was fresh. They were not just controlling me. They were tracking me. Every deposit, every transaction, every little sign that I might be building a life of my own. My life had never been mine. That night I sat in my car outside their house while rain slid down the windshield and opened a new account at an online-only bank using a friend's mailing address. No branches, no paper mail, no trail back to my parents. That became my real savings. The account they knew about, the account they could see, became the bait. For the next 2 years, I crafted a story they would believe. I made small transfers between my visible account and my hidden account to keep the illusion alive. I printed fake statements now and then and left them on the dining table like crumbs for my parents to follow. Every time I mentioned my dream of buying a house someday, my mother's eyes flickered. I wanted her to notice. I wanted her to believe she had discovered something I was trying to hide. Meanwhile, Haley started her first year of med school, funded entirely by what my parents called family effort. I called it my exhaustion. She would call me from her dorm, complaining about long lectures, difficult professors, and how stressful her life was. I would listen, pretending to care, while staring at the calendar on my wall. 3 years until I turned 31, then 2, then 1. By the time the countdown reached its final month, I knew my parents better than they knew themselves. My father liked precision, so I made everything look perfect on paper. Balances, names, signatures, dates, every detail neat enough to tempt him. My mother liked to feel clever, so I let her find what she believed was a secret. I could feel the tension in the house shift. They started talking about me in front of me like I was furniture. "She's been saving a lot," my mother said once while sipping tea. "It's good she trusts us," my father replied from behind his newspaper. I smiled too, because the next time they opened that account, they would not just find money. They would find their own downfall. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, June 10th, my 31st birthday. The air inside the pharmacy smelled like disinfectant, paper receipts, and cheap coffee from the break room. I was halfway through explaining dosage instructions to an older man picking up heart medication when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Normally, I would have ignored it, but the vibration did not stop. I glanced at the screen. Withdrawal, $2,300,000 successfully processed. For a moment, everything blurred. The fluorescent lights, the chatter near the register, the soft beep of scanners, the rustle of pharmacy bags. All of it faded until the only thing I could hear was my own breathing, quick and shallow like it belonged to someone else. My fingers went numb around the pill bottle. The man at the counter leaned forward. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I was not. Not yet. But I would be. I finished what I was doing, walked to the back, took off my badge, and clocked out without a word. My coworker, Julian, called after me, but his voice disappeared under the roaring in my ears. Outside, the sky was the color of wet cement. I walked straight to the bus stop with my phone clutched in my hands like evidence of a murder. Every stop felt endless. I refreshed the banking app again and again, watching the number stare back at me. 0. 10 years. 10 years of overtime shifts. Skipped vacations, second jobs, instant noodles, worn-out shoes, and silent obedience, gone in one click. By the time I reached my parents' driveway, the rain had started. Their house looked exactly the same, neat, smug, ordinary. The kind of house that hides sin behind white curtains and a clean lawn. I pushed open the door without knocking. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. My father was reading the newspaper with his glasses low on his nose. Neither of them looked surprised to see me. "Where's my money?" My voice cracked halfway through the question. My father folded his newspaper slowly, like he had been waiting for this moment. "You should thank us," he said. "It's going to Haley's tuition. You can always make more money, Nora. She only has one chance at this." My mother smiled at me with a calmness so poisonous, it almost made me laugh before I could stop it. "Sweetheart," she said, "you were never good at managing large amounts. This way, it benefits the family." Then I did laugh. It came out sharp and wrong. For a second, both of them froze and stared at me like I had lost my mind. Maybe I had. Maybe 10 years of patience had finally snapped. "Did you take it from the wrong account?" I asked, still laughing. My father's expression faltered. "What are you talking about?" I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the banking app, and turned the screen toward them. "That account," I said. "The one you just emptied. It's not my real savings. It's a bait account." My mother's hand slipped. Her phone hit the tile floor and cracked. My father's face drained of color. "I filed a police report an hour ago," I said quietly. "Forgery, identity theft, grand larceny. They have everything. Signatures, security footage, timestamps. You forged my name, remember?" My mother's voice shook. "You can't do this to your own family." "I didn't," I said. You did. For the first time in my life, they looked small, not powerful, not untouchable. Just two people who thought they could play God and got caught inside their own game. I turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. You have until noon tomorrow to return every cent, I said. After that, I let the district attorney handle it. That night, I did not sleep. I sat by the window in my apartment listening to rain hit the glass and watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and gray. My phone stayed silent, but I knew the storm was coming. At 11:47 the next morning, it rang. My father's voice was shaking. "The money's back," he whispered. I checked the app. The bait account was full again. I did not answer him. I just hung up and called my lawyer, Rebecca Lang. 2 hours later, Detective Vega and his partner knocked on my parents' door with a warrant. The neighbors came outside. The world finally saw who my parents really were. When I pulled up to their street later that day, 2 patrol cars were already parked in front of the house. Red and blue lights painted the white siding like a warning sign. I sat in my car for a long moment with both hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling the hum of the engine under my palms. My stomach twisted, not from guilt, but from the weight of 10 years collapsing all at once. I stepped out just as the front door opened. Detective Vega stood on the porch with his notepad tucked into his jacket pocket. Behind him, my mother and father were sitting on the couch, pale and shaking. "Miss Bennett," Vega said, nodding politely. "We've got everything we need. Signatures, camera footage, matching timestamps. They'll be booked this afternoon." My mother looked up at me with mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Nora, please. We didn't mean—" "Don't," I said. My voice was calm. "You meant every bit of it." My father tried to speak, but the officer beside him tightened the cuffs. The sound of metal snapping around his wrists was soft, but final. As they were led outside, the neighbors began to gather. Mrs. Larkin from across the street. The Hendersons next door. Curtains moved. Phones came out. The perfect family on Maplewood Drive was suddenly exposed. My mother turned her face toward me, her voice cracking. "You'll regret this one day. Blood is blood." I met her eyes. "Then maybe you should have acted like it." The officers guided them into separate cars. My father did not fight. He just looked straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on nothing. For the first time, he did not look powerful. He looked afraid. Haley showed up 20 minutes later, still wearing her med school jacket, the same one I had unknowingly paid for. She ran up the driveway with her face blotchy and her mascara smeared from crying. "What did you do?" she shouted. "They were just trying to help me. You've always been jealous." I cut her off. Jealous of being robbed, of being used. I stepped closer until we were eye to eye. "They broke the law, Haley. You can dress it in family values all you want. It's still theft." She flinched. Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for something to say, but there was nothing left to defend. The officers drove away, leaving silence behind. The street smelled like wet asphalt and shame. I stood there until the last flashing light disappeared around the corner. Rebecca walked over from her car, her heels clicking against the pavement. "It's done," she said softly. "They'll face multiple charges. You'll get an official notice within the week." I nodded, but my chest did not feel light. It just felt steady, like the air after a storm. That night, I returned to my apartment and opened the blinds. For the first time, I did not feel like I owed anyone anything. No more family fund, no more manipulation dressed as love, no more guilt disguised as duty, just silence. The kind that heals instead of suffocates. Over the next few weeks, the headlines hit the local papers. Portland couple charged in forgery and identity theft. Their photos were everywhere. My mother's tight smile, my father's empty stare. Haley dropped out of med school after her tuition was revoked. 3 months later, I bought a house. Not big, not fancy, but mine. A small colonial-style home near the lake where the morning air smelled like pine and coffee instead of guilt. I signed the deed under my new name, Nora Reeves, and paid cash. On moving day, I stood barefoot in the empty living room while sunlight cut through the blinds and dust drifted through the air like gold flakes. The silence did not feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. I thought of everything I had given up, the years, the sleep, the blind loyalty, the endless belief that if I just gave enough, they would finally love me properly. Then I realized none of it had been wasted. It led me here. I donated the $2,300,000 they returned to a scholarship fund for students without family support. I did not need their money. I needed closure. Sometimes people ask if I ever miss them. I do not. What I miss is the version of myself who kept believing that love meant obedience. She deserved better. And now, finally, she got it. 3 months after the arrests, Portland felt like a new city. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. I still walked to the pharmacy every morning out of habit, but the air felt lighter. Nobody was calling me at dawn asking for help with bills. Nobody was reminding me to send more money for Haley's tuition. Nobody was treating my paycheck like family property. My phone was quiet. My paycheck was untouched. For the first time, everything I earned stayed mine. The news died down slowly. At first, every customer who came into the pharmacy recognized me. Some whispered. Others offered sympathy that sounded too much like gossip. I just smiled, scanned their prescriptions, and wished them a good day. I did not owe anyone my side of the story. The truth had already been written across the front page. Elaine and Martin pleaded guilty. The court seized their savings and ordered restitution. They lost the house, the car, and even the timeshare in Arizona they used to brag about at family gatherings. When I drove by Maplewood Drive months later, the for sale sign was tilted and half sunk into the lawn. Someone had ripped the last name off the mailbox. It should have made me sad. Instead, it felt like seeing a set finally taken down after a long, ugly performance. Haley tried calling once. I did not answer. Later, I saw her name pop up in a brief local notice. She was working at a clinic upstate, not as a doctor, but as an assistant. Maybe she was learning what work felt like. Maybe not. I did not care either way. Rebecca and I met for coffee one afternoon at a small shop near the lake. She smiled when she saw me. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," I told her. I had just signed the paperwork for the Bennett Fund, a scholarship created in my parents' old name. It would cover tuition for students from low-income families, kids who did not have anyone fighting for them. Turning that stolen number, $2,300,000, into something good felt like closing a loop. It was not revenge anymore. It was release. Sometimes at night, I sit on my back porch with a blanket and a cup of tea, watching the moon ripple across the water. The silence no longer feels like punishment. It feels like peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop explaining yourself to people who never listened. I think back to the girl I was at 21, the one handing her first paycheck to her mother, smiling because she thought love meant sacrifice. If I could tell her anything now, I would say this: you can love your family and still protect yourself. You can forgive them and still walk away. The night before Thanksgiving, I got a card in the mail with no return address. Inside it only said, "We're sorry." The handwriting looked like my mother's. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it back into the envelope and tossed it into the fireplace. The flames caught quickly, curling the edges into ash. Some things do not deserve to be kept as memories. The next morning, I baked a pie for the first time in years and took it to the clinic where I worked. Julian grinned when he saw me. "You're actually celebrating this year." "Yeah," I said, laughing softly. "For once, I am." As we shared slices with the rest of the staff, I realized this was what real family felt like. No strings, no guilt, just kindness freely given. Freedom did not come from the money. It did not come from revenge. It did not even come from justice. It came from finally owning my life without apology. Every morning now starts the same way. Quiet, steady, mine. I make coffee in my kitchen, open the window, and let the air roll in off the lake. It smells like pine and clean rain. Nothing like the old house with its constant tension and perfume thick enough to choke on. Sometimes I still catch myself reaching for my phone, expecting a text from my mother reminding me to be grateful, or a message from my father forwarding another bill. But it never comes. There is only the calm hum of my own space, the kind that does not demand anything back. People always ask if it was worth it turning in my own parents. I do not have a simple answer. Justice rarely feels clean. It is messy, and it costs something you can never fully get back. But what they took from me was never only money. It was freedom. And getting that back, owning it fully, was the greatest revenge there could ever be. So if you are listening to this and you have ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, hear me. You are not weak for walking away. You are strong for choosing peace over guilt. You do not have to let someone else write the story of your life. Because sometimes the best way to get even is to build a life so good that the people who broke you no longer matter.